Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Tech with Ram. Today I am going to talk about AWS Lambda and I'm going to give you a hands-on on a very common use case that people have while using AWS Lambda using Python. If you're new to the channel, please feel free to like, share and subscribe the channel. Your subscriptions keep me motivated to make more useful content like this. So in this video, I'm going to help you create your first Python Lambda function. I am also going to show you how to set up IAM roles to execute a Lambda function. I'm also going to show you how do you create your first S3 bucket and how do you read a file that is placed in this S3 bucket onto the Lambda. So this is going to be very interesting because it makes two AWS services talk with each other. And this is an area that I personally find very interesting. Then how do I use the data I read from S3 to convert to a Python list and use it for further processing? I'll also show you how to check the logs of the Lambda function using AWS CloudWatch. And, and there will be a lot of debugging if we run into any issues in creating the Lambda function. So without any further ado, let's get into the hands-on part of it. Good. So I have my AWS console open. Please ensure that before you watch this video, you have a AWS free tier account made or any demo account that you can configure so and launch resources in. If not, please go and get one set up. It's very simple. The instructions are on Google. I mean, okay. So let's start. Let's start. So the region I'm going to be working in is Mumbai because that's closest to me. But the same steps can work in any region that of your choosing. Cool. Now let's click on Lambda. You can also search for Lambda and it helps. It will also lead to the Lambda homepage. Okay. If it's the first time you are opening AWS Lambda, then you might see multiple options like dashboard, applications, functions, code signing, layers, replicas, step function, etc. Here. What we would be creating today is a Lambda function. So go to the functions tab of it. Let's click on create function. Let's create this function. Choose the option order from scratch. The other two options are for different use cases, which can be explained in a different video. So yeah, function name. Let's give any function name that you want. So let's give, say, my first Lambda function. Runtime. Runtime is the coding language in which you are going to write your function in or upload the code. For me, it's Python 3.9 because that is the latest that is supported by AWS for Lambda. But you can also do this with any lower Python versions as well. If you are proficient in any other coding language, you're welcome to try it out here. Architecture, let's keep it as 8664 for now. ARM 64 is a very specific use case which we don't need in this in the context of this video. Cool. Default execution role. Like I said, we'll be walking you through how to set up your IAM role and ensuring it has all the requisite permissions. So let's just click on create the new role with basic Lambda permissions. We are not going to use an existing role or a policy template. Now, advanced settings. Advanced settings comprises of code signing, function URL, tags, and VPC, which none of which is required for this demo. So let's just keep all of them unchecked. And let's click on create function. Go ahead and set up. So when you have your Lambda setup, you will see a screen like this, okay, which has a default Python code that AWS provides to you to test your Lambda out and its execution out. So maybe we can delete this command to implement here and just add a print statement. So print, say, hello world, because that's how most functions, most first functions are deployed nowadays. Okay. So once you make any changes to the code in the editor, you have to deploy it so that your changes are saved. Okay. Now, now let's just click on test to see if this actually works. Yeah. Event name, let's keep as test event. Rest everything keep same. We are not going to care about any inputs or any of the other boxes here. Just let's just click on save. Okay. Now you can see that test event was created successfully. So now click on this drop down. So you can see that test event is configured as the default event. So now just click on test. There you go. You can see that the test event name is shown as test event. Response is our return response that was there. It returns a status code of 200 with hello from Lambda message, which is here. And in function logs, you can see that hello world got printed. So kudos, there you have our first Lambda code running successfully. Now, so in every Lambda code structure and any custom code that you make, you need to ensure that the main function of the Lambda is the Lambda handler. Lambda handler is a requisite function for any Lambda deployment. The Lambda handler also should have two parameters, which is event and context. So without a Lambda handler function defined inside your code piece, your code will not get executed in AWS. So if you don't want to call your Lambda handler function as Lambda handler and you want to call it as maybe main one or main five or any demo names that you want, then what you need to do is scroll down a bit and see in runtime settings, there is an option called Lambda function dot Lambda handler. So what this means is the Lambda function here is the Lambda function dot py file that we are editing. Inside that, the Lambda handler function. So if you want to change it to say, instead of Lambda handler, say XYZ, okay, save, click on save, okay. Now instead of Lambda handler, so if I now try test function, see, you see handler XYZ is missing on the module Lambda function. So handler name was changed and we can just now keep it as XYZ. And let's see what happens. And there you go, the hello world is back. So that is about handlers. So let me revert it back to Lambda handler, Lambda underscore handler. Okay, save. Let's keep it as Lambda underscore handler. Deploy. Yeah, there you have our Lambda function ready to go with hello world status. Okay, cool. Now let's set up our S3 environment to progress further. So this would be the S3 home window that you see when you search for S3 and click on it. Let's click on create a bucket. Let's give the bucket name as my sample bucket. Okay. Keep the region same as your Lambda region. In this case, I am going with Mumbai. So just keep it as Mumbai. Okay. Rest of this, you don't need an access control list. So keep it off. Block all the public access because it's an internal Lambda that talking to S3. You don't need to access any object inside the S3 from outside. And this can actually lead to you incurring a lot of money. So let's not select this option. Bucket versioning we can keep as disabled right now. Encryption can be disabled because we obviously would be dealing with sample data that I created and nothing to be protected as such. Then advanced settings, no object logs need to be enabled for this demo. So keep it as disabled. Let's click on create a bucket. Okay, there you go. We have our first error. Bucket with the same name already exists. Let's see what to do for that. In that case, let's give my sample bucket hyphen one. Ensure in your bucket names there is no spaces as well. Okay, now this name also exists. Let's keep it as say bucket for demo one. Okay, so yeah, this name is available. So let's keep it as my sample bucket demo one. Cool. Now let me click on create a bucket and see. Okay, there you go. My sample bucket demo one has been created successfully in the south one region, which is Mumbai. Click on that bucket. Okay. Now, let me create a folder which will contain our data. Let's call this folder maybe source data. Okay. Keep the encryption as disabled and create this folder. Now let's get into establishing a trigger from this S3 bucket to the Lambda function that we had just created. Okay. So since we have a folder, let's say my trigger is say any CSV file placed in the inside the source data folder should go and execute this Lambda function. Okay. So what we do is we go to the home page of the S3 bucket and click on properties. Okay. Properties, please scroll down and come to event notifications. Click on create event notification. Let's say, oh, okay. In general configurations in event name, let's keep the name as my test event. Okay. Prefix, what would be my prefix? Let's just go back to the bucket. Okay. So what prefix is this part of your uh, location of the file inside S3. So if I have file inside it, so any file that gets kept in the source data folder should trigger the Lambda. So source data would be my prefix here. Okay. Yes. Suffix can be anything that is there in the file towards the last. So so if I have a use case where I need .csv files to trigger it, so I'll just give .csv, so that only CSV files placed in source data folder inside the S3 bucket gets triggered, gets the Lambda triggered. Okay. So event types are of different types. So what we need is all the objects getting created. So anytime some file gets placed here, it needs to trigger the Lambda, right? So once you check all object create events, so your put, post, copy, and multi-part upload operations inside the S3 bucket would trigger the Lambda. So uh, just click on all the options there, and then destination should be Lambda function. So because we are obviously trying to trigger the Lambda function here, specify Lambda function. So just click on the drop down here and choose your Lambda function, which is the Lambda function that we have created a few minutes ago. So yeah, so see the configurations again, all the object creation events, and yeah, that's it. So let's just click on save changes. Okay, cool. Now you can see that I have not reloaded the page yet, but I can see that I have no triggers can be seen here or no destinations can be seen here. So let me just refresh the page now after events have been done on S3. Now you can see that an S3 trigger has been placed. So if I click on it, I can see what trigger has been placed. So this is the S3 bucket on which the trigger has been placed. And what kind of trigger is it? Any object create event that has a prefix of source data and a suffix of .csv. Okay, cool. Uh, let's go to buckets. My sample source data. This is where we have the trigger set. Let me just upload any sample CSV file. So I have a CSV source data, comma separated file. So let me just upload CSV source data.csv here and click on upload. Okay. So that I can see that this file got uploaded in S3. Let's see if this has triggered our Lambda. How do we test that? What we do is we click on monitor and click on view logs in CloudWatch. So the time is 2:49 a.m. here. So it would reflect your same time zone. So let's click on the event which got triggered around the same time. Let's click on that. Okay. Let's in display, you can always see the different types of view that you can choose for this event. And here you can see that start request, hello world got printed and end request. So yeah, kudos, your trigger has been trigger is working successfully. So this is how a file placed in S3 can go and trigger and activate a Lambda function. Now let's take this use case a bit more further. So I have a CSV file like this. which contains two columns, student and rank. I want my Lambda function to be able to process this file whenever it is kept on my S3 bucket. Say if I'm getting this file, say monthly, I want my Lambda to go and get triggered every time a file like this gets dumped in S3 and just maybe process the data inside that file. Okay, this is our use case for today. So the source data.csv and the Python code that we're going to use in this demo are both available on my GitHub. You can find my GitHub link in the description of this video. So feel free to download both this CSV and the Python code. Okay, let's see what is there in my Python code. I am importing three libraries: CSV, JSON, and Boto3. Okay, CSV is to process the CSV file. JSON is to return the status response of the Lambda. And Boto3 is an AWS standard library that helps you connect with n number of AWS services. It can be S3, it can be Athena, Secrets Manager. There's a long list of AWS services that gets connected to Python using Boto3 library. So here we have a code. We have a Python code which reads this S3 event. So event is nothing but a JSON argument passed to a Lambda. So if you see the Lambda function here, and in the test, we have created a test event before, right? So it has a JSON like this. Like this, a file keeping file a trigger that we place in S3 would just lead to the Lambda getting an event from S3 using like from S3 that triggers the Lambda function. So that would be a JSON. Inside that JSON, there will be a records key. And in that, so this is how you parse the bucket name and key. I mean, key is the file name that triggered the file, and bucket is the S3 bucket that triggered the Lambda. Okay, so these three things remain consistent throughout almost all the programs in which you need to just read a single S3 file that triggers the Lambda. So select the records, the first element from records, because rest records contains a list of dictionaries. So event params will now contain dictionary, and then inside event params, choose S3 bucket and then choose the name. That would be your bucket name. Key in for key in event params, choose S3 object and key. Okay. So yeah, so here my resource is S3 that I need to connect to. So I click on S3 and I want to get an object placed in S3, which for which you need to pass the bucket name and the key that you parsed over here. Then what I do is I try to get the data out of the, so now I have the file. Okay, the S3 object parameter will contain the file. Now what I do is I try to decode it. So I know I'm going to place a UTF-8 format text file. So UTF-8 is for common for all the text files that you place, and I'm using the split line arguments to split it into different lines. So each split line arguments identifies new line characters inside your file and split it into lines so that it can be read. But now let's look at the file. The file contains 5 rows. This is the file I just placed on S3. So student, rank, and four use case of 4 students. So there's headers and 4 rows. Okay, so total 5 rows, right? So now you remember that we have imported the CSV library here. We can use a reader function to read the data that you have just splitted into different lines. So lines will now contain the entire file as a CSV object. Okay. Now headers, if you would, since I know that my file is going to contain headers, I need to read the headers separately. And in the final data, I don't want my data to contain headers, right? So for that, I do a next function, next of lines. Next of lines would just pass the first line in the file to whatever parameter you're parsing it to. So that is headers. Okay. Now here I'm printing the headers, and then what I do is I want to convert my data into list. So what I do is I convert the lines CSV object into a list and then I print the list data. Okay. This code would be available in my GitHub link, which would be there in the description of this video. Feel free to check it out and reach out to me in case of any questions in the comment section of this video. So I have placed the code here and copied pasted because it's a small code. Click on deploy. My function is deployed again. Okay, so this is the code of the function now. Now let's see if anything actually happens when I upload a file. So we need to re-upload the file because the first upload has already happened. Now we need to create an object again. So when you add a file of the same name to the same folder again, if there is a file with the same name there, that file will get replaced and the new file will override that file. So let's just upload this file there. Cool. The file is now uploaded. Okay. Again, like I said earlier, now to see how our Lambda function has responded to the file event, click on monitor, click on view logs in CloudWatch. It can also fail if we have lack of permission. So let's see if everything is fine. Yeah. So I expected this. We have a client error saying an error occurred, access denied while doing get operation, access denied. So this is where the tricky part is. Here, what this error means is that your Lambda is not able to get the object from S3. So where it failed is nothing but over here where we are trying to do S3.object.get, because your Lambda cannot simply talk to S3. It doesn't have the permission. Now, how is your Lambda assuming what all permissions it has? Obviously, you need to go to configurations and click on permissions. There will be a role, and whatever this role can do, the Lambda can also do. So what you need to do is enhance this role to contain more permissions so that it can read files from S3. Just reading or taking files from S3. We don't need too many permissions. Just talking to S3 and retrieving files from there. That is more than enough. So what do I do? So I go back here, I click on the role name and it redirects me to the management console of IAM. Okay. So here, let's see what permissions it has. Right now, it has only CloudWatch permissions. Okay. Here we can see that over here, just create log group log stream permissions. So that basically lets me create all the logs in CloudWatch. So that is the default created by Lambda when you click on create role. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to add. So we need to add one more policy that can help me get more S3 related permissions. How do I do that? I created a clicked on add inline policy. Now in my visual editor, I get an option like this service. The service I need is S3. Always remember here, you should not choose Lambda because you're trying to give permissions for the Lambda to touch an S3 and not for the S3 to touch a Lambda. So, and the role is attached to the Lambda, not to the S3. Okay. So you choose S3 here. Here we have a lot of actions. We have list, we have read, and inside read itself, there is a lot of options. In write, there's a lot of options. Permissions management, there's a lot of options. We don't need all S3 actions. We just need list and we just need read. More than enough for this function. Okay. Resources. For time being, let's keep on all resources, but ensure that you be specific in your production deployments and keep only the requested strings over here. Now, no request condition to be set. Let's just click on review policy. You can see that S3 full list and read has been granted. So let's give S3 list read as the policy name. Okay. Maybe to separate it out, let's just give hyphens so that it's more readable as a policy name. I've clicked on create policy. Yeah, now I can see that this is attached. Okay. Let's give it a second. Now what I do is I go and upload my file again in S3 bucket, triggering the Lambda again. Okay. So let's see. So this is the error that we got, access denied the last time around. Let's see what happens right now. Okay, I've uploaded my file again. Now let me go to CloudWatch again and just refresh this page over here. It's 2:59 now, and the last event was at 2:55. So maybe it can happen that the log stream is not big enough so that your logs got written in the same log stream. So here, if I see, I can see that after this end, there is a start that's happening. So end and start denotes the start and end of a lambda. Okay. So here, this error has happened before and it has started this time. So here I can see that headers of my file are printed. Okay. Oh, I think cut till here from this access denied part. Okay. No, not from access denied part, from okay. So so now that we have added the role permissions to the IAM, the S3 list read have been added. Let's try uploading a file again to the S3 location and trigger it, thereby triggering the Lambda again. Let's click on add files. Let's click on CSV source data again. Upload. Good. Now let's see. Let's refresh. See what happens. Let's see if anything gets written. No, this is the older execution. Yeah, so the time is 3:02 right now and 3:1 is a log written. Oh, and I can see that the print has worked. Okay, let's see our code. So there is a print here which shows we are in line number 13. Then there is print headers and then print data. So you can see that headers got printed. The data is printed as a list. So there you go. You have your first Lambda function, first S3 bucket, first, I mean, CSV processing from S3 done. You have your first data engineering pipeline here, a simple data engineering use case which can be developed into multiple complex use cases and solutions. So here, this list data can be parsed further for any, you can change it to a data frame, Spark, Python, whatnot. I mean, pandas, NumPy, anything that you want. So I hope this video has been informative for you. Please provide me comments in the comment section on how I can improve your experience, and also also do subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Thank you.